Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 219, The Count, Part 3. On the 22nd of June 1917 in the Sydney Sun, son of a diplomat, career of crime. Priscilla Martha Kerr Weiler, formerly Kerr Wilson, a nurse, today petitioned Mr Justice Gordon to dissolve her marriage with Arthur Alexander Weiler on the grounds that within 5 years he had undergone frequent convictions for crime, aggregating 3 years and upwards. The petitioner said that she married the respondent in October 1908 in Sydney. He then said he had independent means. He left her in January 1914. He was then in trouble and sometime later was arrested in Queensland. He was at present serving a sentence at Bathurst Jail. He received an annuity from his brother in London. The respondent was a Swede and his father, according to the marriage certificate, enjoyed the rank of a diplomat. He was a widower at the time of the marriage. Labby Philip Stein, Hebrew jail chaplain, said he was acquainted with a respondent whom he'd seen in various jails in Australia. The respondent was of a good family and his brother in London allowed him an annuity on condition he would keep out of jail. Witness had tried to reform the respondent but without success. Further hearing of the suit was allowed to stand over for the production of a certificate of conviction. On the 20th of December 1918, the decree nisi was ruled for the divorce and it was made returnable in 3 months. On the 14th of April 1923 in the Sydney Daily Telegraph, the coroner was told yesterday how Charles Frank Walters, 65, a native of Switzerland, and a criminal with a number of aliases, died at Long Bay Jail on the 5th of April 1923. Walters was declared a habitual criminal in 1916 and sentenced to 3 years hard labour on 7 charges of false pretences and was again brought to prison on the 4th of May 1921. Walters was in the bookbinding workshop, giving work to the Sisters of Charity. Suddenly his head fell upon a sister's shoulder and he died a few minutes later. The coroner returned a verdict of death from natural causes. And on the 20th of July 1923, the probate of Charles Frank Walters, late of Long Bay near Sydney, the estate was given over to Reverend Philip Stein. He was a reverend from Melbourne and was Jewish. He was actually Major Reuben's brother-in-law from episode 160. And a little on his family. His first wife and child and what became of them. Well, Edith Sarah Millard, who was born on the 28th of September 1864 in Adelaide, was the daughter of Reverend John Gain Millard and Hannah Ducker, and she was one of 12 children. As mentioned, they divorced in 1892. Edith then married Arthur Jennings Price, a solicitor in Tasmania, on the 30th of December 1893. He was 3 years younger than Edith and she was 29 when they married. They married at the residence of her parents. Edith committed suicide by cutting her own throat on the 29th of April 1896 in Camberwell, Victoria, aged only 31. Her son that she had with Arthur Weiler was only 6. The statement of her death was made on the 29th of April 1886. There is a warning, though, that there is some graphic information contained in this document. I have to report for your information that on 4 p.m. on the 29th of April 1896, I was informed by Mrs. Louisa Young, trained nurse, that Mr. Price, solicitor of Morehouse Street, requested her to call at his residence as above and see his wife. As she did so, she found Mrs. Price lying in a bedroom with her throat cut. I proceeded to the house and I found the body of Mrs. Price lying in a bedroom with her throat cut. The act had evidently been committed some hours previous. I found several of the rooms stained with blood, in one in which I found a large carving knife smeared with blood. Also the dressing table and mirror and hand mirror were stained with blood. The deceased seemed to have torn her clothes in an attempt to stop the bleeding with them, as these were saturated with blood. Mr. A. Price, solicitor, states that owing to certain statements made to him by his wife on the 27th, he decided to live apart from her
and that he arranged to pay the rent for her and also provide for her with a weekly remittance. And Louise Young wrote, "The deceased's mind was unsound in my opinion. She was of intemperate habits." Her husband wrote that she became hysterical, particularly at night. "I left her son with her. He's 6 years old. The son is the child of her former husband." In the Melbourne Weekly Times on the 2nd of May 1896, it outlined the inquest. The inquest on the remains of Mrs. Edith Sarah Price was held at the deceased's late residence in Camberwell. Louise Young, the first witness, was called. She's a married woman who resides at Park Street, Glenferrie, and she said, "I knew the deceased and last saw her alive a month ago. On the 29th of April, I came to the house in consequence of Mr. Price having come to me on that afternoon and asked me to go to his house as his wife was not well. I arrived at 4:15 and knocked at the door. I received no answer, and I thought of going around to the back, but the person next door asked me if I wanted to see Mrs. Price and if I was a friend. I replied yes, and she said something to me about the little boy having said his mother had cut her throat. The front room window was open and I stepped through it. I found Mrs. Price in the little boy's bedroom on the floor. She was quite dead, her face was cold, but other parts not quite so. I saw a large quantity of blood about and a cut in the deceased's throat. I went out of the house and a constable was sent for, but I was not here when he came. I saw nothing more of the body until after I left the room, excepting that I came in once and looked at her to be quite sure. I have known the deceased since last July. When I saw her a month ago, she was quite cheerful, but her mind was not what we would call quite sound. I am a nurse and have attended her little son. I am sorry to say she was of intemperate habits. Mr. Price told me that she had not been well for some little time. He gave me to understand that the case was urgent, but he wanted me to come more as a friend, as I had some little influence over her. During the time I was in the house nursing the little boy, Mr. Price's treatment of her and the little boy was most kind. The doctor made a post-mortem examination of the remains and he found 5 wounds in the throat and both jugular veins were cut by deep incised wounds. The deceased only had one undergarment and shoes and stockings. There was a doubled bootlace around the neck and knotted in front. It was tied across a small punctured wound, but it was below the deep incised wounds. In his opinion, it was tied after the small wounds were inflicted, but before the deep one above was made. The lace was tied tightly, but not tightly enough to have caused strangulation, in his opinion. All of the wounds were self-inflicted. There was no odour of alcohol in the stomach. A cyst in one of the internal organs was of such a nature that it would probably have affected the deceased's condition of mind and would have made her low-spirited and hysterical at times. Some gallstones were present, which also would have caused suffering and led to depression. The cause of death was hemorrhage from wounds in the neck. Arthur Jennings Price, husband of the deceased, said, "I'm a solicitor. The deceased's age was 27. I parted from her on Tuesday last." The coroner said he did not wish to go into any matters of a private nature. He simply wanted to get information on certain points to enable the jury to arrive at a conclusion as to her sanity or insanity. Her husband said, "I made the communications to her about intending to leave her and arrangements for her maintenance. It distressed her and I remained with her that day until 12 o'clock the next day. She had not been addicted to drink to my knowledge. I certainly have seen her looking strange. I questioned her on the subject, but she denied anything of the sort. I now believe Miss Young's statement about the deceased's intemperate habits, though I knew nothing at the time. I kept nothing of an intoxicating nature in the house." He was asked if his wife was of sound or unsound mind, and the coroner said all along, was she eccentric? Her husband said no, she was continually eccentric at night, but she was cheerful in the mornings. She was not low-spirited, but was almost invariably hysterical at night. Perhaps 2 or 3 times in the month she was not. When I left her, I told her I would send the nurse to her and she could keep her with her as long as she liked. I left the little boy with her and is a son by a former marriage. We've been married for 2 years and 4 months. On the morning of the 29th, I posted her some money and asked her to let me know what debt she owed. She never at any time threatened to make away with herself. The first I heard of her death was Wednesday at 5 o'clock. When I left on the previous day at 12 o'clock, she seemed all right. She had got my breakfast and we had a chat about arrangements. I told the nurse, Mrs. Young, that I'd like her to go up and stay with my wife, as I knew of her hysterical nature, and the deceased would probably be very much upset when she heard that I had left her for good. Emma Moss, married woman residing next door to the deceased, stated that she saw the deceased on her veranda at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning. Her little boy was with her. Later on, I came in to ask her for an address. She appeared to be quite insane or delirious from illness. I thought she was delirious. She was in a state of great excitement. I thought she had a fever. She did not answer my questions and could not understand at all what I wanted. She also said, God is God and the world will come to an end today. Also, that she'd been a very naughty girl. She wondered what they would think of her. I thought she was thoroughly ill and quite out of her mind. In fact, I'm sure of it. I took her by the hand and asked her if she was in any trouble and if I should send for help. She took no notice and went on rambling. The witness deposed that the deceased received a letter on the day of the tragedy. The doctor, after hearing the evidence, was of the opinion that the deceased was of unsound mind. He'd never attended her. Mr. Price said that on second thoughts he would like the coroner to read the copy of the letter that he had sent to his wife. It said, "We could never be happy again after what you have told me. I do not think it would be right of me, on any ground whatsoever, to pass by the wretched affair you have disclosed to me. How could I have confidence in you again? I feel I could not. It was too cruel of you. I pray God may forgive you, as I believe he will, if you sincerely look up to him." Other evidence went to show that she was of intemperate habits, and the jury returned a verdict of suicide whilst of unsound mind. And on the 5th of June 1896, another article, a distressing tragedy. Mrs. Edith Price, wife of Mr. Arthur J. Price, solicitor, committed suicide at Camberwell. She was the daughter of a Tasmanian clergyman. When Mr. Price married her 2 years ago, she was a widow with a son 4 years old. Up till Monday, all went happily when Mrs. Price accused herself to her husband of infidelity. Mr. Price was stunned by the communication, which was calmly delivered, and he made preparations to live apart from his wife. He took the matter seriously over with her. He sent Nurse Young around, and she found Mrs. Price lying in a pool of blood. Arthur Weiler and Edith Sarah Millard's son, Douglas Grantham Page de Cass, was born in Geelong on the 12th of September 1889. His father on his birth certificate was listed as Arthur Alfred de Cass. Douglas would have been conceived in January 1889. His father, Arthur, was placed in jail on the 22nd of February in 1889, when Edith would have only been 5 weeks pregnant. The last time she said that she saw Arthur was in March 1889, which meant she would have been 7 or 8 weeks pregnant at that time. So Arthur could have known that she was pregnant. She may have told him that. However, he didn't get an opportunity to meet his son, as far as I can see, as when his son was a year old, he was released from prison, but was within a month placed back into prison for a further 2 years. And after that, up until the time of Edith's death, Arthur was pretty much incarcerated for that whole time. Douglas first features on formal records in the 1912 census. He's listed under the name of Donald Page at Moonee River in Queensland as a selector on the property Harran. Douglas enlisted in World War I on the 11th of January 1915. He stated he was 25 years old and was born at Moonee River. He said he was a horsebreaker and his next of kin was Jessie Bannister of Sydney, who was his aunt. Jessie had married Joshua Bannister in 1880 and was 34 when Edith died. They had no children, and it seems that Jessie and Joshua adopted Douglas. Jessie's husband Joshua died on the 25th of September 1907 in Sydney. He'd been a counsellor in Geelong. On the 27th of September 1907 in the Melbourne Age, it said word was received here on Thursday to the effect that Mr. Joshua Bannister had died that day in Sydney. The deceased had been a member of the Town Council since 1893 and was one of the Villamanta ward representatives up until the time of his death. He was a well-known owner of trotting horses, a successful farmer and produce merchant. Though a comparatively young man, he had to relinquish business some months ago on account of ill health and went to Sydney in the hope of being cured. Douglas was 18 at the time of his uncle's death. So Douglas was mentioned in his uncle's will, which was on the 17th of August 1907, and it stated that he gave Douglas Page, his adopted nephew, a wool sorter of Geelong, my watch and chain. And there was a codicil made on the 24th of August 1907 to say that £600 was to be payable to his wife. She was also to receive during her lifetime a sum of £6 per week. He also added that after the death of his wife, that the executors were to pay the proceeds of the sale of one of his properties to his adopted nephew Douglas Page of Geelong, wool sorter, and Jessie was living at the Esplanade Hotel in St Kilda in 1913. So Douglas enlisted in the 11th Light Horse under Douglas Page. He was at the Enoggera Army Barracks until he embarked and served at Gallipoli on the 30th of August 1915. He was then transferred to the 5th Light Horse and was stationed at Malta and returned to Australia on the 11th of March 1916 and was discharged on the 14th of June 1916 with shell shock. He married Laura Agnes Thompson at Lewich, Queensland on the 9th of August 1916 under the name Donald Douglas Page. They had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. By 1919, they moved from Moonee River to Enoggera in Queensland, where they resided at Everton Park, and Douglas was working as a labourer. In 1928, he was working in the same area, but was a drover at a property called Kia Ora. In 1934, they were living at Cannon Hill in Queensland, where Douglas was a stockman. In 1943, they were living at Bulimba, where Douglas was a stock worker. And in 1954, they were living at Manly, Queensland, where Douglas was a stockman, which he continued as his occupation well into his 90s. Jessie died on the 5th of December 1938 in Cheltenham, Victoria, at the age of 76. And Douglas died on the 4th of September 1984 in Brisbane at the age of 94. His parents are not listed on his death certificate. Arthur Weiler's second wife was Priscilla Martha Kerr Wilson. She was born on the 31st of May 1874 in Queensland to William Alexander Wilson and Lydia Matilda Ironside. Priscilla was the eldest of 5 children and married Arthur in 1908 in Sydney, where he used his birth name, Arthur A. Weiler. They divorced in 1918 and she did not remarry. She died on the 5th of September 1941 in Burwood, New South Wales at the age of 67. So there are descendants of Arthur Weiler, and what an interesting life he led.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.